Last time on Goodbye Sonic the Hedgehog.
This got me thinking about my relationship with the Sonic the Hedgehog series. I'm talking about Sonic and the Black Knight, a 15-year-old Wii game. The Sonic series at this point in time is a whole different beast. A lot of time has passed, a lot of things have happened not only in this franchise, but the world too. But to focus on Sonic, Sonic Frontiers is the most recent Sonic game at this point in time. And I'm about to sell my copy of the game for about $20. That's how I feel about the current state of this franchise, and that made me think about our relationships with art and media, specifically long-running franchises that we grew up with, and when it's time to move on, or if we have to move on. It's kind of like being in a relationship where you're unhappy, but you could still potentially gain something from it. You really want to leave, but something deep down is stopping you from doing that. I don't know what it is, and I have to figure it out. I'm going to figure it out. What was the first Sonic game you ever played? Let me try to remember. Sonic Heroes? But as soon as I found out about the existence of Sonic Generations, I immediately gravitated towards that instead. The moment I saw a picture of the gameplay, I was like, I need that. Right now. Oh, okay. Let's talk about it then. Why do you like Sonic Generations so much? I actually don't know. Sonic Generations is an interesting video game. It represents a crossroad between a time period in which people were enthusiastic about Sonic again, coming off of the release of Sonic Colors, and a very, very long time period in which everything coming out of this franchise ranged from incessantly mediocre to, does anyone even remember this, and what the fuck were they thinking? The 2010s were an interesting time indeed, especially given the fact that it was the first decade I ever got to experience the whole of. So I want to take a trip down memory lane, ranking all the levels from worst to best in Sonic Generations, a game that I have more than 600 hours invested in. I used to spend a lot of time in these levels, making up my own little stories within these levels and actually playing them out with Sonic. So ranking all these levels will be a very nostalgic experience. Number 18, Classic Sonic's Planet Wisp. Classic Sonic's Planet Wisp can be fun at times, but in my opinion, it's generally cumbersome to get through. The Spike Wisp power-up is not that fun to control or play with, and the fact that you have to do puzzles with that power-up, albeit simple puzzles, makes the level all the more annoying to play through. And it's way too long for a level that isn't fun to play through. And don't get me wrong, I love long-ass levels in Sonic games, but when they're not fun, they're really not fun. When I replayed this level for the first time in years, I was just waiting for it to end. So yeah, not good. Number 17, Chemical Plant, Classic Sonic's version. This version of Chemical Plant just isn't anything special. The level design isn't interesting, I don't even think I remember the layout, no new gimmicks. Overall, very forgettable. I think Sonic Mania is way more creative with its reimagining of Chemical Plant. Number 16, Green Hill, Classic Sonic's version. The level design in Classic Sonic's Green Hill is decent, but not really that interesting. There's not a whole lot of variation from the original. There are multiple paths and routes to take within the level, but those paths aren't that dissimilar from each other. Not enough for me to say that it feels like I do something new every time I play through this level. Sonic Mania is also more creative with this reimagining of Green Hill. Number 15, Seaside Hill, Classic Sonic's version. I never really gravitated towards this stage. It's fun to traverse, and there are multiple paths that actually switch up the way you experience the level. Similarly to Hydro City, those passageway parts where you have to make sure you grab those vertical poles in the corridor to make sure the current doesn't fuck you over, pretty much ruin the level, because if you don't jump in order to make Sonic let go of those poles, those poles will eventually break apart in the process, which could lead to your death. Like, you're instantly killed if you touch one spike. These sections are insanely frustrating to get through, and they really demotivate me from trying to replay the level. Nevertheless, I think it's still a relatively decent stage. Number 14, Chemical Plant, Modern Sonic's version. You know, I don't have a problem with 2D sections and 3D-oriented Sonic gameplay. In fact, I really like some of the 2D sections in certain levels, but here there's a bit too many of them. Nonetheless, I still think this mostly 3D reimagining of Chemical Plant is really good. The red rings are also pretty fun to get because many of their locations require some off-the-beaten-path traversal, which is pretty cool because it varies up the gameplay, making the level replayable. So in conclusion, Modern Sonic's Chemical Plant is good, but not necessarily great. Number 13, Planet Wisp, Modern Sonic's version. Okay, so this level is really fun to play through in the beginning sections. Multiple paths in 3D, interesting enemy placement, giving opportunity for varied gameplay. I love all of this, but then you get to those 2D sections where you have to use the Rocket Wisp. Yeah, those parts aren't the most fun. They're not terrible. In fact, I still like replaying this stage, but those Rocket Wisp parts bring Modern Sonic's Planet Wisp down a few rankings because of the vast contrast in the fun you have at the beginning and the fun you have in the mid and end points of the level. Number 12, Green Hill, Modern Sonic's version. Now, I know Green Hill has been reimagined in SA2 before this version, but I honestly think that the Generations reimagining is much better, because it takes advantage of all the more obscure parts of Green Hill. You explore the caves, the waterfalls, and you have a view of the ocean when you're grinding on rails. And that big-ass giant chopper that you're chased by, making for a really cool set piece. Yeah, this is a good reimagining of Green Hill in 3D. Number 11, Sky Sanctuary, Modern Sonic's version. Now, I couldn't decide whether or not I should rank this above or below Modern Sonic's Green Hill, but ultimately I came to this conclusion because although there are way too many fall hazards in Modern's Sky Sanctuary, the stage is very replayable with some very fun platforming sections and multiple pathways to traverse the stage. So yeah, Modern's Sky Sanctuary is really good. Number 10, City Escape, Modern Sonic's version. Okay, this may be a little bit controversial, but I may have ranked this higher if not for the fact that this stage is way too short, like the rapper. Get it? Because his name is too short?
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
It is still very fun to replay, though, especially the beginning part where you're on a skate thingamajig. I don't know what you'd call a skateboard without wheels. Nonetheless, I love the beginning because you get multiple paths to choose from to traverse the stage in the most weird of places, making for some really fun gameplay. And the reimagining of the GUN truck chase is really cool too. Although I think it sucks that they didn't add Big the Cat in this version of the stage because he was in the original. So yeah, I don't know why they didn't include our beloved feline. Number 9, Crisis City, Modern Sonic's version. I don't really have much to say about Modern Sonic's Crisis City aside from the fact that it does a relatively good job of mashing all 3 sections of the original Crisis City into one slightly shorter stage. Minus those 2D sections where you have to utilize the stomp. Those fucking suck. Number 8, Sky Sanctuary, Classic Sonic's version. Regarding the level design specifically, this stage is Sonic Team getting back in their Sonic 3 and Knuckles bag. Which makes sense given the fact that this stage is from Sonic 3 and Knuckles. But what I meant by that is, it's been a long time since we've gotten a level designed in the same vein as a level in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. And I don't remember how the original Sky Sanctuary played out because it's been ages since I've played the game that it's in. but I can say for sure that Sonic Team used the same design philosophy they had for Sonic 3 and Knuckles levels for this reimagining of Sky Sanctuary. Multiple routes so complicated that you can replay this level many times and still find something new in it. The layout of the stage is also very dynamic and creative. There are 3 different ways you can finish the level, and as a Sonic Generations exclusive bonus, skill customization makes this stage in particular infinitely replayable. Number 7. Crisis City, Classic Sonic's version. This version of Crisis City is extremely fun to traverse. Multiple pathways, once again complemented by the fact that any variance in skill customization that you can make makes the stage infinitely more replayable. It's especially fun when you have the homing attack equipped. I also really love how this stage progresses from start to end, because, you know, it really feels like an adventure. It feels like I went on an adventure once I finished the stage. Very satisfying. Number 6. Speed Highway, Modern Sonic's version. There's some really fun level design in Modern's version of Speed Highway. It's probably the best level in the game to speedrun, in my opinion, of course. I know a lot of people would disagree with that, especially since that opinion is coming from someone who doesn't really speedrun like that. And obviously, since this is Speed Highway, the spectacle has to be ramped up to 11. Holding onto helicopters, running on top of roofs, being chased by those badniks that kind of resemble cops while running into the interior of a really tall building, grabbing onto rockets that fly you to the next section of the stage, skydiving, I love all of it. It honestly feels like a roller coaster. Number 5. Rooftop Run, Classic Sonic's version. Another stage that feels like an adventure to play through. Multiple captivating segments. You climb atop a clock tower. You destroy one of Eggman's really big aircraft carriers, which pretty much feels like you're playing through a cutscene. That's how impactful it looks. Oh, and this stage is also very replayable. Number 4. City Escape, Classic Sonic's version. Similarly to the previous stage we just talked about, this also feels very cinematic and like an adventure. I think Sonic Team makes way more interesting use of that giant GUN truck in this version of City Escape. It's a stage hazard throughout the whole level, not just at the end. The skateboarding section is also really fun. And of course, multiple paths for dynamic and constant replayability. Number 3. Speed Highway, Classic Sonic's version. Okay, so one thing I didn't mention regarding Modern Sonic Speed Highway that I will mention for Classic Sonic's version is the fact that this stage looks amazing. The scenery and locale are absolute eye candy, especially that part where you're in a hotel. Traversing this stage, it really feels like I am exploring some sort of megacity on the American East Coast. That aside, all the usual markers of an amazing Classic Sonic level are right here in this stage. Multiple paths, making for dynamic gameplay. The level design is just chef's kiss in general. Wait a minute. You haven't really told me what Sonic Generations means to you. Well, I can still do that by ranking all the stages in the game. Okay, but I think it would really help you if you could compartmentalize your thoughts if you talked about what the game means to you and what the game meant to you emotionally. Okay, well, it was about 2 years after Sonic Generations had been released. The year is 2013. The webpage is the front page of Amazon UK. I type Sonic Generations into the search bar. Next thing you know, a listing of a PC copy of Sonic Generations pops up. I didn't own a console at this point, so the only device I could play video games on was the very laptop I was using to look for that listing of Sonic Generations. And up until that point, the only video games I had played were a bunch of Flash games, mostly fan-made Sonic Flash games, and Sonic Heroes, of course. That was it. I was about to make Sonic Generations be the second proper video game I ever played by begging my parents to buy it from Amazon since you couldn't find it physically in stores. My parents finally budge and buy the game for my birthday. The day when it's delivered finally comes. I wait a long time until finally my grandpa calls me to tell me we're going to fetch the game from the post office because it was just delivered. But he had a few errands to run first, so the wait was gonna be a little bit longer. I don't really remember what the errands were specifically, but I remember stopping by a house with him on the way to the post office. Whoever lived in this house owned a dog. I tried to pat the dog on the head, only to get an aggressive reaction. My day was almost ruined until we finally got to the post office. We collect the package from the locker it was assigned, then an excruciatingly long drive home is upon us, until finally we get home, and I get to insert the disc into the computer, forgetting the fact that that computer was old as fuck and definitely was not gonna run a game like Sonic Generations. Remember, this is 2013. So, the game doesn't work. What do we do? Well, my grandpa has a friend that can lend us a helping hand. So he calls him, and eventually we figure out that I have to play the game on a more modern device. That device was my grandpa's old work laptop. A day passes by, and finally I get to play Sonic Generations, forgetting the fact that my mother actually grounded me from playing video games because of misbehavior the previous week. I still try to play the game anyway, and with excitement I turn the laptop on to find both Steam and Sonic Generations already downloaded. Unfortunately, I have to play the game very discreetly, so the nanny we hired doesn't notice me breaking the rules of my grounding. So this was my strategy. I play the game for about 15 minutes, then I stop and I walk out the study room the computer was in, acting like I wasn't doing anything in there. I do the same thing 3 times until I finally get caught. At least I was able to get past the first few cutscenes in both Green Hills, I say to myself after the laptop is taken away from me. Every time I start up Sonic Generations and play Modern Sonic's Green Hill, I am instantly transported to the memory of this day. Aside from that though, I wouldn't say I rank Modern's Green Hill that high, even though it's still good. I'd rank stages like Classic Sonic's Crisis City a bit higher. Wait a minute! This is supposed to be a ranking video. Let's actually get back to the ranking. Number 2, Seaside Hill, Modern Sonic's version. Modern's version of Seaside Hill is infinitely replayable, as in, it's the second most replayable stage in the whole game. It's almost like a fully revitalized version of Seaside Hill in 3D, but it also feels like a stage that belongs in Sonic Heroes. There are also many non-conventional ways to get through this level that you'll often see speedrunners use. I like to take those unusual paths sometimes too, which really goes to show how replayable this stage is. The fact that you have a section where you can choose between 3 unique ways of traversal further cements this. I usually pick the cart, by the way. The only part I don't really like is the underwater section, but it's very easy to avoid, so that doesn't really knock this stage down too many points. Aside from being ranked number 1, that is. To which, speaking of number 1, I'm starting to get the feeling that you lost your passion for Sonic. What? Why? You don't seem that passionate when you talk about this game in particular. Oh yeah, well, let me tell you about my favorite stage in Sonic Generations. And now, for the best stage in Sonic Generations. Number 1, Rooftop Run, Modern Sonic's version. I never got to play Sonic Unleashed. I still haven't played it to this day, and I still really want to. But why do I still want to play a game that I haven't really thought that much about in almost a decade? Well, because despite never playing the game, I got to still experience it through watching Let's Plays, cutscene compilations on YouTube, and constantly listening to the soundtrack. I cannot tell you how many times I've watched Let's Plays of Sonic Unleashed in particular, particularly those done by Kobanermani456. I practically lived in Sonic Unleashed's levels, just like I did with Sonic Generations. Which is why when I found out that I got to play Rooftop Run in Sonic Generations, I was absolutely elated. First off, both the original rendition of the song that plays in this stage and the Sonic Generations remake are abso-fucking-lutely amazing. They are just orgasmic material for the ears. Second off, I've always really liked how the locale looks. It looks like a mashup of a bunch of different European cities. And of course, most importantly, the level design is the best in Sonic Generations. More replayable than any of the other stages I've talked about. Blasting through libraries, hopping from one vintage building to another, the final section, it's all amazing. This is absolutely the best stage in Sonic Generations in my opinion, but I hope that one day I can finally experience the original version in Sonic Unleashed, and especially the hub worlds in Spagonia, because of the orgasmic material that is both the night and day renditions of the theme song. Okay, but I'm still not convinced that you're passionate about this series anymore. I can tell you have a connection, but I get the feeling that that connection you feel is solely to the past. You know what? You're right, but I still want to keep taking this trip down memory lane. I don't have a problem with that. Go ahead. Well, I was thinking that I should talk about Sonic Riders next.